Welcome to Signature Required. It is intended for Tennesseans by Tennesseans.
What makes them tick? What lights their fire?
We're pulling forward people that, unless you listen to this interview, you might not know a thing about them. The heart of a Tennessean, the volunteer state, is serve, and we do so largely without self-promotion.
And these are genuine people that get up every day and want to make art, or want to educate the nations, or want to have a heart of love in a way that makes a difference.
Learn from 50 years of experience, take a nugget away, and then go share it with a friend. Chris and Elaine Whitney, founders of OneGenAway, welcome to Signature Required.
Thank you.
Man, what a pleasure to be here.
I have a big heart for both of you two. So I don't often know guests before they come on the show, but I have the distinct privilege of knowing both of you all and your heart for the Lord, what you're doing for the community, not just in Tennessee, but in our country. And I am so excited to have our audience get to learn about what you're up to. And I'm convinced that by the end of this podcast, you are going to have converted all kinds of new people into OneGen supporters. So maybe just take a second and tell us what OneGen is about. Give us, just for someone that's never heard of it or never seen one of your trucks on the road, what do you do? And we'll go from there.
That means me.
That you. I'm looking at
We pick you.
Yes. So we are a nonprofit food ministry that started out of the back of a Hyundai Santa Fe that is replicating around the country now. And our mission is hope, honor, and dignity shared through food. And I feel like that just says a lot right there.
Hope, honor, and dignity shared through food. That's
Yeah.
interesting. Tell me more about that. What does that mean?
Receiving food may be one of the hardest things for a human being to do. And we unfortunately had to experience that at a period in our life when our middle daughter, who's now going to be 34, was born with spina bifida. And I was in the construction business back then, and it was a very brutal year weather-wise and construction, which impacts construction. And almost half of our income went to medical insurance premiums.
Wow.
So we were, and then we had a house to live in, you know what I mean? So it was just really tight. So we lost everything we owned. Elaine was in a food line for like 6 months. And the shame you feel is unbelievable.
Well, you know, they ask you all these questions, you know, how much do you make and why did this happen and how, you know, and I told Chris when we started this, I said, I don't want anybody to feel that way. I don't want anybody to feel shameful. And so we don't ask any questions. We ask no qualifying questions at all, that whoever is in line to receive food will get food. And that's on a Saturday morning, normally, that we have like 300 families getting a grocery cart full of food for free. And so we serve all of these different families, and they come from all walks of life. The faces in our lines are just changing. You know, it might be the working poor. It might be somebody who lost their job. It might be somebody who lives in their car, like just all kinds of different people. But it's such an honor, and that's why we want, you know, with hope, we want to bring hope to them and dignity back to them.
I was, in preparation for this podcast, there was a stat I received. 41% of Tennessee families with children report experiencing food insecurity in a given year. And I think people would be surprised to know 41%, that's almost half of families with children, that number is so high.
Well, we live in Williamson County in Tennessee, anywhere between 7th and 12th wealthiest counties in the United States of America, depending on
How you measure it.
how you measure. Franklin's special district in downtown Franklin, Tennessee, which is kind of what I would say the seat of the county of Williamson County in a sense. Brentwood, Franklin, where we live. 41% of those kids are on assisted lunches.
In downtown
In one of the
Franklin.
wealthiest places in America. We have trailer parks, we have public housing.
Yeah.
And there's people that have no idea that they're there.
You know,
Imagine that.
Yeah.
what's so sad to me is in that school district, there's kids that leave school on a Friday and they don't eat again until Monday. So we have this one story of a child that, they get the fuel bags, which we love the fuel bags too. And they took their fuel bag home dug it in the backyard, a hole in the backyard, put it in there so he would be able to eat. So what we do also is we help the kids in the schools. So the social workers knows like what families that need it. So they'll come to our warehouse, or we'll take it to them and give those families a banana box of food, of non-perishables, so that the whole family can eat for the weekend.
Did you say a fuel bag? What?
Yes.
What is that?
That is, some organizations do like a little fuel bag. They'll put them in the kids' backpacks, like little snacks and drinks and stuff like that. Yeah, juice and things that they would be able to eat over the weekend.
And statistically, by the time they reach middle school, only 10% of those kids will do it because of stigma.
So they won't accept the fuel because they're afraid.
Right.
And they're embarrassed of their...
Yeah. And the reason we engage social workers is the fewest amount of contacts for people suffering food insecurity helps maintain dignity. So we don't need to be seen. We can hand it to a social worker who's helping them with other things. Then they get to be the ones that hand them the box of food. And another organization is like the Juvenile Justice. Never even thought about that, right?
Sure.
I was speaking to a group of principals, and Zanny Martin, who's a good friend of mine here in Williamson County, she runs it, and she handed me a card and said, "I'd love to talk to you." And I'm thinking, did one of my kids do something I don't know about? I'm like, well, could have been, you never know. And she told me about that. We have families that are given children in juvenile court that weren't expecting it. And we would love to be able to do something for them and give them a box of food. And we got a great story. It was a teacher was in juvenile court with a family member, and she was awarded 3 children that were not hers at the moment, probably nieces and nephews. And they handed her a box, and she started to cry. She goes, "I had no idea how I would feed these extra kids."
Wow.
And then Zanny said for her people to do something kind, you know what I mean? That's a difficult emotional place to be in, right? And she said for us, for the people that work with us to be able to do something like to give something to someone with no questions or anything, she said it's changed the atmosphere of our employees.
Kristen, Elaine, one of the things that is so unique about your story is that you speak with an authenticity of having needed food yourselves. And that is really rare. And it's also one of the fingerprints of how God works in people's lives, is that he often burdens our heart, sometimes first in pain, so that we can then serve in a very special and unique way. And so food as an area of shame is something that you've talked about. And I struggle when I see people that are hungry, that are homeless on a corner, because oftentimes I don't have food in my car to give, and I can give money, but as soon as I give money, I'm wondering in my head of whether I am enabling purchase of alcohol, drugs, or something else. So how do you think about providing food versus money? What goes through your head when you see somebody on the corner, or do you just carry food in the back and you're still in the Santa Fe?
I think what happens to us when I see people like that, and I'll feel prompted to give them money sometimes, but to me it's like I want to be obedient to what God's telling me to do. And so if I give food, if I give money, to me, I was obedient, and what they do with that, that's between them and God. That's kind of how I do that with people that are on the streets and corners asking for.
And thank you for having that heart.
Yes,
which
for
is,
sure.
First of all, it starts there, right? That even to have the thought that, I'd really like to do something. But so what I recommend is get some gift cards to McDonald's or Wendy's and carry them with you.
Okay.
A $5 or $10 gift card.
That's a great idea.
And then you just hand them a gift card to a fast food place, and they can't spend it on alcohol.
That's true.
And they're going to have to spend it on some type of nutrient, right?
Okay.
And that way, it's just, if you had like $5, $10 gift cards in your car or something, you just hand them a gift card and they can go to a restaurant and eat. And you're going to know right away. If they won't take it, then you're like, well, good thing I didn't give them cash.
Yeah, that's true.
See, y'all, I knew you'd solve this for me because I needed this answer, because it does. You pull up and your heart breaks, and for any number of different reasons. And that is great. I am going to do that, and that is, thank you.
Another cool story. I mean, we have a million stories, but right here, not far from where we sit, where where Old Hickory crosses over 65, there's someone that sells newspapers there, right? Well, our drivers are at that left-hand turn signal fairly often.
Yeah.
Every day.
And they've gotten to know this guy, and they know he needs potassium. So they always keep bananas and give him bananas when they drive by. And they're in a 26-foot refrigerated truck. So they got to catch the light right, but when they do, they always have something for him to give to him. So
I just feel like that's the heart of our drivers too.
It's just being creative in the moment, right? There's things we can do. We talk about this all the time. It's people ask us often, well, what about people taking advantage of you? And first of all, they're not taking advantage of me. It's they're taking advantage of a commodity we've been given, or we may have purchased, but we may have rescued it or whatever. But that's not on us. That's between them and God. And I tell people all the time, I said, the people we serve, maybe 1%, I would say literally, if any, are taking advantage of us. Most of them are like this. Can I ask a question? My neighbor couldn't get out, and I know they need food. Is it okay if I share my food with them? That's the common, the people we serve, that's what their heart's like.
Elaine, I want to go back to something you said a minute ago, because what you do has a heart for the Lord, but it's also a logistical process. And Spence and I know logistics, and we have hired so many different people to drive vehicles and handle logistical problems. And you just spoke about the heart of your drivers. Tell me about the people that are on the boots on the ground, because you've grown to be such a large operation. It's not just you two doing this work.
Yeah, give us a
week.
size for the scope, because it's pretty impressive.
Well, our drivers are incredible. We call them first responders. And they will, they rescue food and then they feed people. And they just have the heart to, when they see somebody, they're like our ambassadors. So everywhere they go, every store they rescue food from, they just know the people in the back, and they just have a heart for them, and they just get to know them and know, hey, how's your son, or how's your daughter, or how's, if they had a surgery, they just love people, right? And it's just so honoring to us to be able to work as a team with them. They're just incredible. They really are.
Yeah, you were asking about scope. So we have warehouses in Franklin, Tennessee, Decatur, Alabama, and Panama City, Florida. Numbers can get jumbled, but in 2014, we did $1 million worth of food on a $25,000 budget, which means nobody got paid, obviously. Because our rent payment was $2,000 a month. Ergo, our budget was $25,000.
Hashtag entrepreneurship.
Yes. Welcome to startup.
Yeah.
Yes,
Don't
right?
get paid.
Yeah, exactly. Many years, yes. But and then in 23, we closed at $2 million cash budget and almost $26 million of food. 9.3 million pounds of food.
7.7 million meals.
Wow. How do you measure the value of food? Are you looking at like what it would sell for retail, or what it
We're
is
looking
like?
at what we sell for retail. So we, and it varies because we rescue Costco, Fresh Market, Trader Joe's. I mean, some high-end stores. We got like a pallet of truffle oil the other day. You want to know how much truffle oil is?
Do you know
A lot. I mean, it was outrageous.
The pallet alone was $120,000 for that truffle oil.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So
The
I mean,
value of
we
that.
get a lot of, so we pick a number, in that $2.50 to $3 a pound range. We kind of just use an average number.
Yeah.
Because when you're dealing millions and millions of pounds and it's coming and going like day of,
Sure.
food we rescue is on someone's table that day. So it's hard to, and you got 5,000 pounds of food in the back of your truck.
Yeah.
So it's hard to go through that's a squash. How much is a squash? How much is it?
How much is a steak? How much is this?
Yeah, that's important, because we often talk with nonprofit leaders and people outside the business world. And one of the things that Carli and I always say is that if you can't measure it, you can't manage it.
That's right.
And it's so important just in how you fundraise and how you communicate your success. And this is echoing something you already do well, but speaking to a lot of listeners that are not nearly as advanced, is that there's a heart there, but sometimes that heart doesn't ever translate into the actual numbers that enables fundraising and the type of growth that you've experienced. Chris, and just living life with you over a number of years, I always love to hear about the latest capture of exotic food that you have today. Just captures, like, I remember one time you came in and we were like, got 10,000 pounds of frozen salmon that we got stocked up in the warehouse. I mean, it's just the most wild things that you get. So how much of what you get is like fresh food that you have hours to get rid of, and how much of it is like, okay, we've got a little bit of time to work with this?
Most we've got a little bit of time. It just depends on the produce we rescue, where the stage in life it is. But most things will have a day or two. But we often talk about, we hold, until these disasters that just happened, we normally hold about 140,000 pounds of food in our warehouse. So people invariably come in one month and then come in the next month, and they're like, well, gosh, you've got all the same food. And we're like, no, it's not the same
turned over daily.
It just looks to you like it's the same. But this stock rotates, rather quickly. So we've never been in the business of holding food no matter what. It's always, how fast do we get it to where it needs to go? And there's some business reasons behind that. That shrinks our footprint of warehouse space needed, which lowers what we have to pay in rent and electric. And, so a lot of these things were out of necessity because we started so small. So you learn how to be very efficient with what you have, and you learn how to rotate things out very quickly. If we're holding food, that means someone's not eating. And if someone's not eating, we've missed our mission.
For sure.
So you move it as fast as you can, whether we're not so much concerned about shelf life as we are people not going hungry.
I think the food, too, that they rescue is great food, and it does have 2 to 3 days left. But I think what is so, talking about our drivers, what really fulfills them, too, is that the food that they rescue literally is on someone's table that evening. So somebody's going to be able to eat. Like, we'll go to different, homeless shelters. They'll go to different, like domestic violence shelters. And but then they go to these elderly high-rises because the elderly, which is shocking, only get $19 of food stamps a month. So how is anybody supposed to live on $19 a month? So, we're not their source, but we help supplement that. And so they'll go into elderly high-rises and just open the truck up. They'll take it into their community room, and the people just come down. They love to see them. They just shop for fresh fruits and vegetables we'll have, and it'll be protein and, just all kinds of things. It might be desserts. I mean, it's like literally a full meal, for them. But they just do that, and we do that. They have different routes that they go on, and they might be there, 2 times a week or 3 times a week, and it just really helps. And I think just having that heart that our drivers have, it just is so fulfilling and so rewarding for them too as well.
I love hearing about the dignity at every age and stage, because you're helping families, you're helping people in the workforce, you're helping the elderly. The need for dignity and the need for food never goes away. It's an entire lifespan. I want to ask you, because we have a couple on a couch and we never get a couple on a couch. Spence and I are unique, not to you, but unique in our peer group, that we've started businesses while we're having babies and we're trying to grow our family and our companies, and there are really good days and then there are really hard days.
Yes, it is.
And what you're doing is true entrepreneurship out of a need that you saw. How has it been building this together all these years?
You go ahead. I'm going to let him start with this.
No, I expected. I expected this question. We get this question, I think, quite often. It is, I think, one of the reasons we gravitate to the two of you is like we feel so much like you get it. We have a lot of great couples that are friends of ours, but very few can we talk to like we can talk to the two of you.
Yeah. We have some similar scars.
Yeah. Well,
sure.
It's isolating.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Very much so.
And I mean, it's the discipline of how do you not talk about work or your kid. I mean, when that's all you do is work together and you raise kids together. You know what I'm saying?
And
so
24/7, right? Work together at home together.
No,
it doesn't.
It never goes away. And so for us, it's learning that discipline of how we can cherish our time together, things like that. But I think it's been, for us, I think Sarah being born with spina bifida was probably, you said something earlier, Spencer, that I hope people got that circumstances in our lives shape a lot of who we're going to be and how we're going to be. And that moment we had to come together because we had no hope medically.
No.
It was nothing. It either was God shows up or we're in really big trouble.
Yeah.
There was no in between. There was no medical procedure that could fix this. So I think that moment galvanized us in such a way that we learned how to flow together. But I do tell one funny story, and this is a true story, as much as you two will hilariously laugh.
You're going to tell the same one. Go ahead.
Yeah, she's heard it a million times, but we often, not often, we used to, we don't so much anymore, we would always say, and so one day I just said, hey, if you would have known then what you know now.
Oh, yeah.
And Elaine looks at me and she just deadpan looks at me and goes, today's not a good day to ask that question. And I went,
And that was truthful.
note taken. Time for us to go to different rooms.
Okay,
You
thank
two
you.
get that more than anybody, almost.
Exactly.
But if
That's
you work
so
together out
true.
there, you totally know what I'm saying.
I would have
So
hid
true.
in the fetal position under a chair had I known year
Right.
over year what. Yeah.
Well, you had talked about that, but when that happened to us with our daughter born with spina bifida, like you're just surviving, right? You're just literally trying to survive. And we had another child too that was 2 years old. So, and
Can you tell us what spina bifida is to?
Yeah.
Yes, sure. So we found out when I was 4 months pregnant that there was spina bifida. So what happens is your spine comes together, and a million cells or billion cells come together to form the spine. But hers stopped, and then a sac was on her back on the outside, and there was 5 vertebrae floating around in that sac. So when we got the ultrasound, you're going for your ultrasound, you're all excited, and you get there, and then more doctors come in, more nurses come in, and you're just like, what's going on, So what happened is we literally saw the vertebrae. He showed us, like, here's the vertebrae. First of all, this was devastating. He does the ultrasound, and he puts the paddle down, and he says, well, your child has spina bifida. It's one of the largest I've ever seen. Your child will never be able to walk, never have control of her bowels, and I'm just like, we're just blown away because you're just thinking everything is fine. And so that's what happens. And then so the day after she was born, well, God miraculously healed her. When she was born, her spine, all the vertebrae were back in place.
Oh my
And
gosh.
there was just spinal fluid and nerve endings in that sac. And it was miracle. I mean, everybody was just everybody in that delivery room were crying, and the doctors, and I mean, it was just like she came out and the doctor was like, it's a girl, because we didn't know, and she goes, and she's kicking her feet and she's moving her legs, and we're just like, it was incredible. I mean, it was just, I can't even describe what that feeling was.
We have so many stories. I mean, we have a million. I mean,
So-
we talk about OneGen a lot, but that was our first
Oh, wow.
foray as a couple of, like I said, being fully engaged in something that it was almost us against the world in a sense, right? We did have a lot of believers that
Yes,
were, but
and family.
but there were people that couldn't believe what we were believing. I mean, literally told us later that I just avoided you because we couldn't believe what you were believing for. And which is courage, and I love the maturity of
Yeah, for
having the
sure.
courage to say that. So I think looking back, we'll be married 38 years next month. And looking back now, those moments in time, I believe, forged us to be entrepreneurial,
Yeah.
forged us to do the crazy. Moved to Franklin, Tennessee 20.5 years ago. We didn't know a soul, no financial
Yes.
support, and started church.
We always say that's not the brightest move, but we were obedient. That was a tough move.
But so those things of when we looked at each other, that when we found out and went home and called our parents and told that nobody knew that there was even a chance, and there's a lot of crying, a lot of tears, and I looked at Elaine and I just said, so what are we going to do? Are we going to belly up and die, or are we going to fight for what we know to be true? And man, she's so tough. I love this woman. She just looked at me and said, we're going to fight. And I said, game on. And so we never got another ultrasound till the 9th month. We just literally believed God. There was
I want to
nothing
be
left.
a guinea pig, right? I mean, it was just, they wanted us to come in and do all these tests, and we're like, no, I'm not going to do it. Like, there's no way. Because I knew for me personally, and I know for him as well, that if something happened, it would like really devastate us, and we're like totally standing and believing God, and I don't want anything to thwart that at all.
And there's a lot of cool stories in that journey that were amazing, that
for
where
sure.
God just reaffirmed over and over and over. And
But I feel like we tell that story, but we don't tell how, like, so Sarah is great. She'll be 34 next month. She walks. She's great. She walks with a little limp, but that's it. She had scoliosis, which she had a 110-degree curve, and they got her. She had to have spinal rods in her neck to her back, to her pelvic, and multiple. She's had 17 surgeries,
like 11 years old, got paralyzed in surgery. Had to teach her
surgery,
to walk
had to teach her how to walk. We were supposed to be in the hospital
two
for
other
3
children.
weeks. Supposed to be for 3 weeks, and there for 3 months trying to teach her. And we just had to tough love her. It was the hardest thing we've ever done. But she's great now, right? And I mean, she's living on her own. So she's been just literally a miracle all of her life.
I know your faith obviously plays the whole foundation of all of this, as it does for us as well. But I want to touch too, and so many times in marriage, you reach those points. I always say there's the day you get married, and then the day you realize you're actually married, because it's the day where you look at each other and you're like, I don't know if I can stay. I'm so mad. This is really way harder than I ever thought it would be. And you choose to stay.
Yeah.
And that's the day that you're actually married.
Yes.
That's really good.
And
Good point.
not everyone makes it to the actually married stage. They think this is too hard. What, for you guys, I know your faith is part of it, but what pulled you through so that it didn't drive you apart, but it seems like it really solidified you as a team?
I think getting saved was the time, don't you? Probably.
Are you talking about during
Sarah, all of it? Like, what
Mm.
kept you guys together instead of falling apart?
I think really, when we got married, we were both raised Catholic. I wasn't practicing Catholic. Elaine was more of a practicing Catholic, and but I had been with some guys that were what people would call born again believers, and actually I prayed. I'm 25, Elaine's 22 at this time, and I actually prayed with a guy when I was 21 just so he would shut up and leave me alone. Really,
That is truthful.
It's very true. And I started building all these churches, and I knew the lingo and I knew the language. But so we're married and having a candlelight dinner, BK, before kids, because when you have
Who
kids,
has a candlelight
you don't
dinner
like
after
candles
kids?
when you have children. That's
Fire
just not-
hazard.
And you don't have time, right?
Yeah.
and you don't have the time or energy. And we were literally sitting there one night, and Elaine had told me it was Lent, so it was Easter season, and she said, I want to go to Mass every day. And I was like,
Wait, first of all, Chris calls himself a C and E Catholic, so Christmas and Easter, and sometimes just a E Catholic, right?
yeah.
And I went every day during Lent. So
She wanted
I
to go
wanted
to
to go
church
with
every
me.
day, and I was like, Mass every day, and I was like, I'd rather you just stick my head in the door and shut it, or something, I mean.
I'm
like,
not
that was-
gonna get up
That
at
was
6
not on
in the
my top
morning,
of the
right?
list of things I wanted to do. But I'm like, yes, dear, I'll be glad. And so we did, and then we were just having that dinner one night, and she just looked at me, she said, there's got to be more to this than what we're getting right now. And so I called one of the guys I worked with, and I thought later they probably dropped the phone and went, my
they've
God, it's
been praying for him for 4 years.
It's like, oh my God. And I think that commitment, then we got water baptized together. Filled with the Spirit together. I mean, literally in the tank together. I mean, I believe God just, not to sound strange, but he knew that we needed to be forged together
Absolutely.
because of what he had called us to do. And that there was going to be, this was just the beginning of the level of attacks that were coming. And so I think people get fearful about the attack, and I'm like, that's just, once again, it's just a character building thing, man. I read the end of the book. We win. We win this thing. We really do. We are more than
Yes.
conquerors. We are going to win.
But I tell Chris sometimes, I'm like, look, I like my character just the way it is. I don't want any more trials, literally.
Don't pray
I
for
learned not to pray for
character.
Yeah,
patience
yeah.
either,
Don't pray
because
for
you will
patience.
definitely get
Yeah.
trials.
Oh, man.
And I think for us, it's like one of the reasons, once again, we love the two of you is because, we've got a few years on you guys, obviously, and
More than a few.
yeah, I'm just trying to be.
No.
Yeah, but it's we kind of, I think, in some ways, see a little bit of us in you guys. I think you're more gifted than we are, smarter than we are in a lot of ways. But your faith in your marriage and how you love your children well, we admire tremendously, and so we love we want to be a part of whatever we can do to pour into that. You know, I mean, that's what's in it for us is we, I mean, I'm in the stage of life, and you've heard me a little bit about this, about passing batons. And so for us, it's how many batons. We're in a stage now of OneGen's growing, thriving, and we feel like we're coming to a precipice of what we were supposed to do, where we were supposed to get it. And then someone else needs to take it from there and run it. We're going to stay plugged into it and protect the why and continue to be the founders and the visionaries, but yet somebody else is going to do all the other stuff. But then we can start to pass all these batons. And our batons won't just be from a business perspective. We believe it's going to be marriage, and especially couples that are married and work together. Because if divorce is hard not working together and being married, imagine what it's I think people think it's easier, and it's like, no, man, it's harder. It's really.
Listen, many times, though, and I think God's just works all this out, of course. But, there's days that Chris wants to quit. And I'm like, no, we're not. And it's never happened on the same day, thank God.
Except that one day.
Except that one day. That one day I said, no, don't ask me that question. But we never, literally, we're always pulling each other up. If you're having a bad day, I'll pull you up. It's, vice versa. It's just, and what's so crazy is I guess I was so naive. I thought this happened to everybody. I just thought that everybody's marriage was like that. Because I was 22 years old. I was so naive. Didn't, lived a great life, with my family and everything, brought up that way. And I just had no idea. And so, I don't know, it's just interesting though, but God literally knew exactly what we needed and just brought us together. And like you said, just forged us together to know this is it, we are married, that moment.
Yeah, the key to me to marriage is intentionality. You need to be intentional in love, in challenging conversations, and you just have to understand there's a difference between a desire to quit and quitting. The desire to quit makes you human. Quitting makes you a quitter.
Yeah.
Right? There's a big difference. So just don't be a quitter. The desire to quit is normal, man. My God.
We all feel it.
We all feel that, right? Sometimes on a daily basis.
Something that I see throughout your stories is that you all seem to have a great discernment of what season of life that you're in. And it's one of the things that left a lasting impression on me. And Carli and I have this conversation often, is that there's 4 seasons. There is the spring, the summer, the fall, and the winter. And different things happen in each of those seasons. If you try to plant something in the winter, that is most often going to end very poorly for you. Springtime is for planting. And then in summer, if you try to do winter activities in summer, that is going to result in suffering. And what's amazing is that life as a whole is rarely aligned in one season.
For sure.
You're going to have one season of your relationship and say, you know what? We may be going through a winter season, which is when winter does what winter does, which it kills off the weak. It's a pruning season. It's painful, but that's what creates room for spring. And then you hope to get to fall where it's harvest. And that's everything you've been waiting for and working for. But sometimes your relationship is in one place, your business is in another place, your relationship with the Lord is in another season. And I've noticed it with my own friends. I have friends that I've had my whole life, and I've gone through seasons there. So the discernment that you all have to recognize, even in your current season, that you have had a sustained fall period of time and that you are harvesting the work that you have done in OneGen, the types of numbers that you have produced, whether you measure it in pounds of food or the money that you've raised in a backdrop of an extraordinarily difficult period of time. Like no other nonprofits are experiencing what you all are experiencing in Harvest. But I also hear you saying, I feel a little bit of the winds of change, and not to speak a winter season over you.
Please don't.
I can.
It doesn't have to go in
We
order.
like fall. We like fall.
Yeah, that's right.
Like fall.
So?
I look good in autumn colors. We'll just keep it
Right.
there.
Stay right there.
So maybe you can just speak to a couple of periods prior to OneGen. So you all have had a life prior to OneGen.
Oh, wow.
And you've shown an ability to be able to transition from one season into OneGen very effectively. So maybe take us one chapter back in the book and tell us what predated OneGen.
Wow. I was in the insurance business. I got in the insurance business. Part of the spina bifida was a whole, and then losing everything and starting over again.
Everything.
You know, I've had some significant failures, things I didn't do very good at. You know, when I was in construction and felt like there was more, that I was gifted beyond that. So I have a high school diploma. I've been to college now. I went to a week at Harvard Business School, which is really weird.
He graduated
to
in
start
a week.
there, to get a week at Harvard Business School.
It was
only
he's so
time,
smart.
first
It was
time,
so fast.
first time and only college campus I've ever been on. So if you're going to start there,
Harvard.
it's pretty cool. Anyway, so I had a high school diploma. I was smart, but just came from a very dysfunctional family. My dad was an alcoholic. It was a real tough childhood situation. So I figured, well, I'll sell home improvements because it's kind of in construction, and I failed miserably because of the process. It was fake, and I don't like fake. I want to, genuine. So I failed.
To know you is to know that's true.
Yeah. So it was weird, like fake a price and then act like you make a phone call, like that's so cheesy, man. I couldn't get in. I just couldn't believe in it. But God's fortuitous nature. I sold a door to a guy I went to high school with, went to a Jim Rohn conference, read The Greatest Salesman in the World by Og Mandino, which everybody should buy that $5 book and read it because it's fantastic. Changed my life, didn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
And he said, you ought to get in the insurance business. And I did. So I was very good at insurance. And so in that process, Sarah's born, we were in a church where we were going to be licensed and ordained. It got really strange doctrinally 1 year in, left that, the thing I thought I was called to pastor, went to this startup church at the time that grew
while
to be—
I'm pregnant with Sarah, so we're going through all of this, church changing and
that
everything.
church grew to be 4,000 people, and we ended up being unpaid youth pastors in that church.
Was this in Tennessee?
In
Yeah.
St.
No,
Louis.
St. Louis
This
for
is St. Louis.
13
This is
years.
prior to Tennessee.
Yeah, for 13 years.
And then that there was a really, really difficult leave in that whole process. So some of the major dysfunction you would see in a church, we experienced, like we're literally blackballed publicly from a pulpit.
Whoa.
And stuff. So we've been through a lot of stuff. I mean, we got stories on, layers of experience, unfortunately.
For sure.
I heard a guy, Billy Joe Watts, once share, God rarely extracts leaderships from the ranks of the unscarred. And which is a great quote. And we got a lot of scars, man. Unfortunately, but it hurt us more than we knew.
Yeah, for years.
And so I was really successful in the insurance business in St. Louis. 1 degree of separation from probably knowing almost anybody in the world, and I learned so much from business owners. I dealt with a lot with business owners. I sold medical insurance so I could get to meet the business owner and do buy-sell agreements and do estate planning. So I started to learn some business principles. Nobody taught me. I just figured that was my mailbox money, right? The health insurance paid monthly. And then I could get to know the business owner, the employees, and they became my clients. So I didn't have this broad book of business, but what book I had, I sold deep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's a lesson in that.
There's a big lesson.
That is true.
And it was about relationship. I learned about relationship and serving. That's where my serving, so unpaid youth pastor of a 4,000. So there was a year I preached twice a week. And ran in a commission-only insurance business.
And was a husband and a father.
And I was not good at husband and father. So I failed miserably. So I was an undiagnosed alcoholic. My dad was an alcoholic. God gave me a gift. Elaine would tell you I used to drink almost a 12-pack of beer a night.
Every night.
Wow.
When we first got married.
And after I got saved, one day I was looking at her watching a football game or something. I looked at her and said, "This will be the last drop of alcohol I ever drink." And that was 38 years ago.
And inside, you guys, after going through, all of this of him drinking every night, I thought, okay, right. You know what I mean? But it's been, 37 years. And he hasn't had one drop, even of non-alcoholic. Like he hasn't had a drop of alcohol. And it was just like that. God just took that desire away
but
from him.
that addictive personality goes somewhere else, right? So I didn't know any better, so I just work was that was my drug, was work. And so Elaine wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, and she was, and I was.
With Sarah, we had to be.
And I was bound and determined I would do whatever that took to make that happen for her. And but that's where my heart to serve came in, and we led mission trips overseas with 50 teenagers and did street dramas and stuff. Crazy,
so fun.
Crazy stories. Really cool. Seeing God just do some really neat things. But that was prior to Tennessee. I mean, and we moved to Tennessee and didn't know a soul, and I would commute back to St. Louis. We're trying to start a church with no money, no anything, didn't know anybody, so couldn't have done anything harder on earth almost.
I think that was so funny because when you're talking about that, how, Chris was in insurance, right? And he was a workaholic. So he worked all the time. He had an office that he would go to, and, he'd leave early in the morning, come home, and I barely can see the kids, put them to bed, And then when we moved to Nashville and to Franklin, the very first day we moved in, and next morning, everybody, kids off to school, and I look at Chris and I thought, oh my God, he's here. Like, wait a minute. Like, wait, where are you?
Nowhere to go.
He has no office to go to. I thought, oh my God, how am I, like, I clean a house. I have all these, things that I do in my routine, right?
Yeah,
I got all this routine to do. And I'm looking like, oh my gosh, how's that going to happen? And so what was so great, I think, like you've always said, though, that we knew we were here to start a church in Tennessee, but what it really was God was literally just forging our marriage even closer. So we would do our work in the morning, he would do his work, and we'd just go and get a coffee, Starbucks downtown Franklin, and just walk around and meet people. I mean, it was the best time.
It was.
Really, we had such a great time.
A couple lessons came out of the church in St. Louis, and then Tennessee when we moved, that about my character. And I wrote a book called The Dirty Church, and it talks about, the first part's what I call biblical justice. The last 2/3 of the book's all about serving. And I talk about when I remember I was an unpaid youth pastor, so I thought I was all that in a bag of chips. And a guy asked me to be an usher, and I literally went to Elaine and said, what does he think I am? I'm like a pastor, like I'm going to be an usher. And God really convicted me.
Right.
And I
you
repented.
Don't humble yourself, God's going to humble you.
I
right?
repented and became an usher, and out of that, God opened up these doors to people that changed our lives forever because I was willing to be an usher. And then when we got married, when we moved here, Elaine went to work outside the home, which is how OneGen started, was this job she took. It was really the beginning genesis of OneGen. And but when she went to work at Embassy Suites, this was after this job. The next job was Embassy Suites, and she had to be at work at 6 a.m. She would get up at 4:30, and God convicted me. He said, I want you to get up every day and cook breakfast for your wife. She served you all these years. It's your turn. And that's where I wrote in my book, I said, if you're not serving your spouse, you're not serving anybody, you're kidding yourself. Because that's where it starts. And so I would literally make her breakfast every day before she went to work. And I loved it because it blessed her.
It did, but boy, was that hard to receive. You know what I mean? Because all these years, like when it's in St. Louis, and I would get up and make coffee. I'd take it to him every morning, while he's getting dressed, and, just having that conversation. And so when he started doing it for me, I was like, it's just, it's always easier to give than it is to receive. But sometimes we have to learn to receive. Yeah. And that was a very difficult moment of that. But
And one you took into your nonprofit is helping people receive. Yeah.
And that's what I hope people are understanding as I'm trying to weave the story of how we became who we are right now, and it's become the fiber, I think, of who we feel like who we are as a couple. We try to be, and we want to protect that. But it is the essence of who we are. Serving people unconditionally is, I believe, the key to a successful society in any way, shape, or form.
It's one of my favorite biblical narratives that I see come through, which is before the Lord called anybody to do much of anything of consequence, there was a wilderness experience prior to that
that's the
calling.
truth.
And Jesus went through a 40-day wilderness experience. Moses went through a 40-year
Wow.
wilderness
Yes, that's
experience. And I think the timing of you all starting OneGen, how old were you all roughly when you started OneGen?
Wow, we moved here 20 years ago, so, I'll be 60.
12 years.
I was
51.
40. I was
51
40, yeah.
When we moved, but we
When we
started
moved here.
OneGen. I was 51 and you were 48.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's a really important message to say there's some people that are sitting exactly that age that feel like, man, what's getting away from me at this point, right? Like I'm moving towards what could be the last couple chapters of what I'm here for. And the fact that you all have probably done the most successful and life-changing work starting at effectively 50. And the legacy that you've created from that is amazing. But it ties to the wilderness experiences. And some of it was, over a hot anvil fire, forging, really having to go through some tough stuff. And Carli and I, we don't have time to tell the stories now, but we have them. It's like we have
I want to
some
hear
of
them
those moments.
at some point.
Another day.
We need to flip this.
Yeah,
And
right.
put you on the couch and we'll sit over there.
We're the
No,
ones
it's
that
much
ask the
easier to ask
questions.
the questions
Yeah,
than
I
to
get it. I
receive
get
them
it.
later.
We're just planting
Yeah.
that seed right now,
Yeah.
We ask the questions here, Chris. That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
No, thank you.
So
But we do.
maybe let's just do this as we just kind of bring it back to present day, because I want to
Yeah.
make sure that the spirit of something we try to capture in every podcast really ties into people that are doing something for the state of Tennessee, either by being here or something that I feel like Tennesseans should really know about. So food insecurity is enormously impactful. We have a foundation, the Patton Foundation, that just commissioned a study that studied thousands of people across the state of Tennessee and discovered that 70% of people are reporting food costs as their largest pain point that they deal with from a budget perspective, which really checks out with the numbers we've been talking about already, that 41%
Yep.
are reporting food insecurity. So talk to us from a policy or a legislative perspective. Is there anything, Carli uses this analogy well, if you could wave a magic wand and you were able to bring about a change or two, is there something that you would point to that could make a difference, that could help?
Yeah, I think so. It was part of the vision, I believe, when God birthed us. So let me piggyback on something you said. I firmly believe God has to take you to the backside of nowhere to get you out of you, so that He can get in you.
Yeah.
That's
That's
that
the truth.
wilderness.
That's the wilderness.
And it's not fun.
No,
No.
gosh, no. It is.
It's
It
not.
literally is a purging
Yeah.
of who you are, because if you literally are going to lay your life down for Jesus, that's what it takes, and that is a lifelong process. The wilderness experiences are just the foundation of getting you even to a place where you can be molded and shaped in, like on the potter's wheel, right?
Where you can listen.
Where you can listen to Him. And but to your point on policy, so I believe in Isaiah 58, verses 6 through 12, that there are some mandates by God for the body of Christ. House the homeless, feed the hungry, and clothe the naked. I don't believe it's supposed to be a legislative policy to fix food insecurity or fix hunger. If I could wave a magic wand, and we're starting to have some of these conversations, we're in it's just been a crazy couple weeks even, but that some of our, as nonprofits, and you've heard me say this, that we would all start to play together and not be siloed. How do we integrate? How does the body of Christ, that's one of my passions, is the body of Christ doing the same thing. The church, not a church. If we as believers would learn how to play together, work together. Businesses do this all the time. Businesses have to work with other businesses to function.
Yeah.
But in the nonprofit world, we feel like we got to be our own little thing, and nobody, don't you come near me, don't you steal my donors, don't you?
Yes.
It's scarcity mindset.
Scarcity mindset. Instead of saying,
don't take my donor. There's so much,
Anyway, yeah.
It's no need to be like that, but it happens.
To dial back into food, there's so much food thrown away, wasted, that's perfectly edible, perfectly easily obtainable. It's a logistics issue. It's not a supply or demand issue. We feel like we've got a pretty good logistics model on how to make that happen. So I feel like if I could wave a magic wand, that the state and the federal government would come to us and say, we think that you can end hunger better than we can end hunger. So we want to take our budget and give it to you. And what I would say is, I don't even need all of it. Just give me this portion of it, but with the caveat that that other portion clothes and houses. And we get creative on housing, how to house homeless people. And there's another segment of this population that nobody's talking about that we've just come to aware. 27% of our active military are food insecure.
No.
Just get that, put that around your head for
Yeah,
me.
they're serving our country.
27% active military are food insecure. And so
And that's not counting the veterans.
Veterans that are retired,
Oh, yeah.
you know, I mean, so this is, I am not upset with the federal government. We, as the body of Christ, I believe, acquiesced our responsibility to the federal government in the 1930s with the New Deal. Oh, the government's going to do it? Great, you do it. And they were never called to do it. We are called, mandated to do it. So therefore, I believe that if I could wave a magic wand, that's the magic wand I would wave, is that we would have a dialogue with state government, with national government to say, look, I'm not asking you to hand it over today. I am kind of really, but I'm willing.
You can if you
you
want
can.
to.
Yeah,
We'll do that.
But I'll patiently walk you through it. But I honestly, I think that that as a nonprofit, I feel like we've built something. God's allowed us to build something. He's built something that He's allowed us to steward. Is really what this is, and that and we have great voices in our lives, like the C12 table we sit at, right? That are great leaders speaking into our lives. So I feel like if I came to my C12 table and said, hey, the government's saying we can feed the state, I'm fully, that we'd be like, yeah, we could do that, right? And so then imagine what that's like, man. And that's going to empower people in our state, because we have 13 employees, but we have thousands of volunteers. We are the volunteer state.
Yeah.
And churches, what is, Jesus came not to be served, but to serve. And so what if we mobilized all the people in the state of Tennessee to say, we are going to end hunger in our state?
Love that. I love your community message in that it's all of us together.
It has to be.
I also want to do a call out for listeners that don't know what C12 is. Chris and Spencer met each other at a round table. You're on a board of 12 Christian entrepreneurs, business owners of a certain size and scope that you get together every month and not only study the word, but hold each other accountable for your business practices and what it looks like to live out your faith in the workplace, in the home, et cetera, et cetera. So just a call out to that in case people didn't know that background. But to piggyback off the question of if you had a magic wand, Spence likes to ask, and maybe I'm stealing your thunder a little bit. I apologize. It's such a good question. I wanted to.
We're in the couples quorum.
exactly
right. Yeah.
It's over
okay.
now. Yeah, we've lost control now.
But some of my favorite podcast answers we've had is when Spence asked the question, okay, you have your magic wand, but what if you could tell listeners, tell everyone one thing that you don't think people know, that they don't understand about food scarcity, about what you do? What is the one takeaway that anybody listening today, if they left and could repeat, then you have been fruitful in this moment?
I think one thing I think of is the face of hunger isn't what you think it is.
Oh, that's good.
It looks just like you.
Yeah.
It looks just like you would never, ever know.
So true.
Wow.
Because I see it.
And neighbors, right? Like no matter where they live, anybody lives, your neighbor might have this huge home with no furniture in it because they can't afford that, but they want the home, but they don't have any food. I mean, those people come through the lines. I mean, we have the faces of our lines just change constantly, especially with the increase of the food cost these days. And people just can't afford it. They can't feed their family. So it's shocking, to be honest. And it's just.
We had a woman recently, we were speaking at a luncheon, and she raised her hand to kind of interrupt me, which I asked her to. I said, please interrupt. And she said she was in a domestic violence situation. Now she's leading part of this ministry.
Wow.
And she raised her hand and she says, you don't know me? She goes, but I was in your food line, and me and my kids would not have eaten if it wasn't for you. See, the face is not.
It's true.
If I said anything, eliminate your stigma of what hunger means and understand it's the face of anybody in a grocery store, anybody in a line, anybody in your church, but they're not going to let you know because it is so hard. So let's not make it hard, man. Let's not say, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, or just go work harder, or just go do this. Just say, how can I help you? Because most people are in a season. You mentioned seasons, right? And our job is, instead of demeaning them in that season, what if we said, we're going to walk with you in this season? Together, we're going to walk through this season.
That's why your message is so powerful, because you bring the authenticity of having been those faces of hunger, and
Our face.
only from that
So
place are you able to then come and speak to an audience to say, hey, people walked with us, and look today, just a handful of decades later, what an impact, what fruit you have bared through your journey. And it's really why Carli and I love to have you all in our lives as well, is you marry well a nonprofit heart while still having a business acumen that, for those that haven't ever seen your branding before, you all are very intentional about your branding. Your trucks are not running up and down the road in worn out beater trucks. You could justify not decorating and branding the trucks like you do, but you do. You decal them. And I know, Chris, because I see your trucks all over the place, up and down the road.
I snapped pictures and sent them to Spence. I was like, Chris in the wild.
Yeah. And I just am so excited for those that are on a nonprofit journey of their own to hear and learn from some of the wisdom for how you all have grown this. And it's also not lost on me as a logistics person that, Amazon has just launched this kind of new same-day delivery thing about 2 or 3 years ago that has the world enamored. You all have been doing same-day delivery for like a long
funny. I
time.
didn't even think
It's
about
like,
That's true.
welcome to the game, Amazon.
exactly.
Meet Chris and Elaine Whitney.
Yeah.
Okay.
That is funny. I never
That's
thought
good.
of that. That's hilarious.
Jokes. You have all the jokes.
That was a good one. That one was good.
So thank you for being here with us today. We are thrilled to give OneGenAway a megaphone. People are getting a great return on any investment that they make in what you all are doing.
Thank you.
Well,
And
thank
so
you.
please stay sensitive to the spirit of where the Lord is calling you all, whether it's to stay exactly where you are or whether it's going on to the next thing, because I know from the amount of forging that you all have gone through in life that the Lord is not done yet.
Amen.
So
Amen
whether
to
that's
that.
good or bad for you, there's going to be more chapters
Hold on.
ahead.
We'll
so
pray with you through it.
yeah, that's
Amen.
right. That's
Well,
right.
we're honored to have even been asked to be here.
Yeah.
So we love you guys and believe in you guys, and we're so proud of you for what you've done and what you're continuing to do. So thank you.
Yeah, I think to tag on what you just said is, we've all heard most of us have heard a message preached about a tapestry, and the hot mess on the backside of it. And we talk about, we've lived enough life now to see the backside, but we've also got to see some of the front. So we are extremely motivated about creating some more hot mess so we can see what's on the front. I mean, we're not, I really appreciate your encouragement, and I hope everybody out there listening, whatever season you are in life, you're not finished.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Don't quit.
I always believe our former years are meant to be more greater, than our latter years. I mean, our latter years are meant to be far greater than our former years, because we've learned we should have learned enough right now, right? So we can be. It'll appear that we're more impactful in a shorter window of time when really we've been that impactful. We're just feeling it because of the short amount of time. And I think we're more efficient, and we adjudicate in a much more efficient manner, if that makes sense. And so I appreciate that that encouragement. And I'd say the same for the two of you. There's going to be a lot of seasons coming, man.
Yeah.
And they're all going to be a blast.
And just put on that seatbelt and enjoy the ride.
That's right.
On the armor. Yeah.
Chris and Elaine and OneGen are just some of my very favorite people.
That was one of the most meaningful conversations I feel like I've had in a really long time.
I think there's just different people, and in their case, couples, that the Lord brings into your life that you journey with. And sometimes it's for a season where you're there for a specific purpose, and sometimes it stretches for far beyond, and it goes through a lot of seasons in a lifetime. I really feel like Chris and Elaine uniquely are positioned for a lot of seasons of journey with us. They recognize it, and in some ways I think we recognize it too, that while their scars are a little different on the surface, that's about it. Beneath it, they're pretty much the same. We've experienced a lot of the same forging, you and I, that they point to. Our story is just unique to us, and their story is unique to them. But I really appreciate how much their marriage shines through as something that has bridged through all of the tough stuff, because they had a lot of off-ramps along the way. And you said that well in the podcast, that you're married on the day that you say, I do, but there is that day where you're really married. And I also think that you say, well, marriage isn't always about happiness. Our culture is full of, well, he or she's not making me happy anymore, and that means that they're doing something wrong, or I'm not enough, and it's the wrong gauge.
Yeah. I think it's important to note that some marriages aren't meant to be. And I'm always sensitive because I feel like I hit the lottery. And even though we've been through some stuff, you are kind and compassionate and such a great partner. And we've grown up together to be that way. I mean, we weren't always where we are now, certainly before, and neither were Chris and Elaine. So I'm always quick to say there are some situations where it's not an option. And I have a heart for them too. And I think that's important to note. But I think you're right in that marriage on paper is one thing. It's a day of commitment. It's love and rainbows and white dresses and my very favorite part, the cake. But there is that day where you look at each other and you realize, like, do I choose you against all reason? And it may be a day where you're embarrassed. It may be a day where you're furious. It's maybe a day where you feel deceived because nobody's perfect and you have to still choose. And they have done that. And I think the other thing that came out, you and I, we always joke, people keep telling us we're too young to do stuff. We were too young when we got married. We were too young when we had our kids. We were too young when we started our first businesses. And we did a lot of things the hard way, but we ended up in a place where I wouldn't trade it for anything. But I think that journey along the way, it did forge us together. But part of that is because it can feel really isolating from the people in your community. A lot of times, best intentions family doesn't understand. Best intentions friends don't understand. And so it's like, what does your husband do? And it's like, well, it's complicated. There's a lot of things to explain. And so I felt really seen by Chris and Elaine. And I think there's a lot of other entrepreneurial marriages or people that don't have that normal 9 to 5, or maybe the female's the breadwinner and the male is staying home. People that live different than maybe their community that can see, like, hey, in isolation is forged something special.
I think we often see that your ability to lead is directly proportional to the pain that you've experienced leading up to that. And they were very transparent in their own seasons of humbling, of having to stand in a line asking for food and be questioned about why and how much money they make, and the authenticity to say there was so much shame in that season. And Chris giving a story about, I'm not going to be an usher in a church. Like, that's beneath me. To tell those stories is very vulnerable. And I think it's incredibly relatable that we may not be as brave all the time to tell those moments of humbling in our own lives. Hopefully we become that brave, because it shows what an impact that those stories can have in giving permission for people to see themselves in the stories and lives of who they're listening to. And they do a great job of being able to show a pathway of great success and blessing, but not cover over the hot mess behind the quilt that Chris talked about at the end.
I think that's really right. And I think where we are in our journey is the hard has been so hard, and the faith component of it is still so raw that I think sharing those stories is important. I think I'm still learning how to articulate what the Lord has done over the last decade in our lives. And some of it isn't our story to tell. Some of it is the very personal family stuff that we're walking through with each of our kids, who are uniquely gifted in their own ways but have their own challenges. There are things that I pray that the Lord won't waste our scars, and that Chris and Elaine have them, and now they know how to share them, and that's part of their passing the baton. And so I think my prayer for us, Spence, in this moment is that we learn the lessons we need to learn, we treasure them up in our heart, and then when it is our turn to pass the baton, we know how to share them well.
I think that's exactly right. We share stories, and you're right that some stories are uniquely for us. It's kind of like when you wake up from a scary dream or a funny dream and you try to describe it to somebody else and it just loses something. Like you're like, oh, well, this thing jumped out and it was like this. And you can kind of tell halfway through the story that it's one for you. And I think that also is something that we have planted in each of us individually, is that there are some things that are for us that have shaped who we are and are not meant for everybody else along the way. And then there are others that are exactly for that, to say, look at this journey, look at this path, and it serves as encouragement.